Hello and welcome to Nullitaire Gaming, where we play games with 0 players, or in other words, we play bots against one another. And in this series we're playing Pendragon, The Fall of Roman Britain, a game by GMT. This is volume 8 in the Coin series, designed by Morgan Guillaume-Reti. It's essentially about the end of British rule in England. Britannia. Okay, we're going to set up the game and get started. Okay, the game is set up. As usual on this channel, we're going to go for the long game whenever that's possible. So we're doing the De Excideo Britanniae scenario, which is a full scenario, 6 epochs. And so I've set up the game according to those instructions. If you're not familiar with this game, just a quick glance at it will probably be enough to convince you immediately that this is a quite complicated game. It's arguably the most complicated of the coin games. It's certainly the most complicated that I've ever played. I haven't played all the coin games, but this one is, of the ones I've played, this one's the most complicated by far. It's not even close. All right, so I mean, we got a ton of pieces just on the board already at the beginning. So let me give you a quick tour of this. We have 4 factions, of course, as usual with coin game. We have the Dukes faction, which represents the Roman forces in Britannia. So they're all on the board at the start. So they have forts, that's these red pieces here, and they have cavalry, that's the red square, the red cubes. Okay, and we have the civitates, so this represents the sort of regional forces, so the British under Roman rule now, but maybe not throughout the course of the game. They could definitely separate from the Romans in time. Okay, so they have lots of different pieces. They've got towns represented by these light blue pieces. So these are more like urbanish areas. They've got hill forts. Okay, so more sort of rural fortifications. They've got militia, it's these light-colored cubes, so more sort of informal military. And they've got comitates, so a more formalized military. These start off out of play, so these don't exist yet in this world. So if the civitates separate from the dukes, okay, so decide to go their own way, out from under the rule of the Romans so much, then they develop their own army, and that's the comitates. Okay, and we have the Saxons here, the black color. They have settlements represented here. So these are, if they sort of get a foothold, you notice they're not on the map at all right now, and neither are the Scotti. They're just not here yet. Okay, but they can come into Britain and try to establish themselves as permanent residents. Okay, and so the settlements represent that. They've also got war bands, the black cubes, so that represents their settled army. And they have raiders, which are these sort of boat-shaped pieces here. I always imagine them as boats. Okay, as far as I know, these pieces don't exist in any other coin game. I've never seen them anywhere else. But they represent, raiders, sort of parties that come in, try to steal some plunder. Notice the gold pieces all over the board. That's a representation of plunder. So basically the Saxons and the Scotti as well are seeing all the shininess here in Britain. They want some for themselves, so they send raiding parties in, represented by those boat-shaped pieces. They try to come in, grab the plunder, maybe engage in a little skirmish, and then take off again. Take that plunder back home. Okay, so those pieces, don't affect control at all, because they're not a representation of any kind of settled population. They just come in, grab some plunder, and try to take it back. Okay, and the Scotti, similarly, these green pieces here, they have settlements representing their settled population within Britain. They've got war bands representing a more settled military force, and they've got raiders. Okay, so essentially the conflict at the beginning anyway is the Scotti coming from Ireland and Scotland in the east and north, trying to come in and get some plunder for themselves and maybe try to establish a little bit of a permanent residence within Britain, and the Saxons doing similarly, but from the continent, the south and the east. Okay, and of course the dukes and the civitates trying to hold them back, and the dukes and the civitates having a sort of friendly-ish relationship right now, but it's on the verge of fracturing. Okay, and that's where we are at the beginning of the game. All right, let me give you a little bit more of a tour. Like I said, the gold cubes here represent prosperity, so they're scattered throughout the board. There's 80 of them on the board at the beginning. There's a total of 90 prosperity cubes, so there's 10 off the board at the start. Okay. The oceans here, we have Oceanus Britannicus and Oceanus Hibernicus. We have Oceanus Septentrionalis and Oceanus Germanicus around the board. They can be patrolled or not patrolled, so we have little markers. This is the patrolled marker here. Okay. Or they might be unpatrolled, like up here. Patrol. All right, so that represents the sea force that can patrol the oceans and make it harder for raiders to get to the shores. Okay, so an unpatrolled sea, it's going to be easier for raiders to get in. A patrolled sea, it's going to be a little bit harder. Okay, we also have roads. So you see these sort of gray lines that go through the map. All right, we have Londinium here, obviously modern-day London, and we have Eboracum up here. That's modern-day York. And we have roads connecting both those cities and other areas of the map. Okay, and while those roads are maintained, and at the beginning of the game they are, I have a marker here, roads are maintained, but they could also be not maintained. Okay, while they're maintained, that makes it easier for the dukes to get around, and the civitates as well, to get around the map quickly. Okay, let's see. Let's look at the outside track here. Tracks resources, of course, except for the Scotti and the Saxons in this game don't have resources. Instead, this tracks what's called renown. So I suppose sort of their fame, how scared everybody is of them, I suppose. Okay, but the dukes and the civitates have resources as usual. At the beginning of the game, the dukes just use the civitates' resources. Okay, they're here in Britain, so they're using the local resources. But if they have a breakup, then the dukes will have to start using their own resources. Okay, so that can happen along the way. Okay, while we're talking about that, let's come over here. Look at this. Imperium track. So this keeps track of the relationship between the dukes and the civitates. Okay, notice it can become fragmented here. This is fragmentation. Okay, so that's like everything's gone south. Okay, but right now they start this game anyway at Roman rule, so the Romans are in charge, and military dominance. Okay, so things can happen, right? It can become autonomy. So that means the civitates have become autonomous. They're separated from the dukes at that point. Not yet fragmented, it's not that bad, but they're on the way toward their own rule. Okay, and you also have a different kind of dominance, civilian dominance versus military dominance. So whether the military is in control or whether politicians essentially have taken control. So at the beginning, Roman rule under military dominance, but things can change in that relationship. Okay, that's a pretty good overview, I think, of the board. No, not quite. I should have mentioned the different types of terrain that could be found on the board. So there's clear terrain, which is sort of this green color. So notice sort of in the middle here, a lot of just sort of green. I guess I always picture it as like grassland. Okay. But there's also hills, kind of this brownish color. So over here, in Wales and down here. And the highland areas up in the north. Okay. Hills. And you also have fens, which is sort of this, I don't know, what would you call that, kind of a grayish color, I suppose. Okay, over in the east, you'll find that along the eastern shores here. The sort of moors over there. Okay, it's also true that the Saxons consider the fens sort of home terrain. They're just more comfortable in the sort of marshier areas, and so they get some advantages in battle when they're in that terrain. Whereas the Scotti consider the hills their home terrain. That's where they're most comfortable, and so they get some advantages in battle for that as well. Okay, I think I'm done talking about the map. Let's move on. The next thing I want to talk about are victory conditions. So what are our factions trying to do? And no surprise, in this game it's somewhat complicated. Okay, so let's look at the dukes first. So this is just a quick summary of their victory conditions. So prosperity plus prestige exceeds 75 at Roman rule, or 60 at autonomy and military dominance, or duke's control plus prestige exceeds 17 at fragmentation. Okay, so it really depends on what the status of the relationship is between the dukes and the civitates. If we're at Roman rule, then the dukes needs high prosperity and high prosperity plus prestige. Okay, prestige, by the way, is something a little abstract. It's not represented by anything in the game except just a little token there. Duke's prestige. Okay, the dukes can gain prestige through various events. Okay, so if the game is at Roman rule, then the victory condition is quite high, 75. But if it's at autonomy, okay, so the relationship between the dukes and the civitates is starting to break down, then it falls to just 60, but there still needs to be military dominance for both of those. Okay. If we get total fragmentation, then the dukes forgets entirely about prosperity. It's like, to heck with the Britons and their prosperity. Instead, it's just the dukes just becomes interested in control plus prestige, and that has to be at least 17. All right, so around the resources track here, this is indicated which one of these victory conditions is relevant at given the state of the game is represented by this red pawn here. So notice this one right here on the board. It says prosperity. Oh, you're reading it upside down, but prosperity plus prestige, Roman rule. So right now, because we're at Roman rule, this is the relevant victory condition. But you go down the track and you'll find other ones. Okay, so this one is prosperity plus prestige at autonomy. So that becomes 60, and following it all the way around over there, we see control plus prestige if at fragmentation. Okay, and that has to exceed 17. Okay, so 3 different possible victory conditions depending entirely upon the status of the relationship between the dukes and the civitates. All right, the Scotti, they want their renown to exceed 45 and have at least 4 Scotti settlements on the map. Oh, well, that's not so complicated. All right, they want at least 4 of their settlements on the map, and they want their renown to get up to at least 45. Okay, so there's their victory condition there. They want to pass 45. Okay, not too bad. That one, much easier to understand. Okay, the Saxons, they want their control to exceed 10, or not at fragmentation. Saxon renown exceeds 30, and at least 4 Saxon settlements are on the map. Okay, so they want, first of all, control to exceed 10. Okay, so they want to actually establish some settlements and gain some control, whereas the Scotti really don't care about that. They want renown. Okay, they want to plunder the place, and just put at least 4 settlements. Okay, so I mean, I guess they do care about a little bit of settlement, but they don't care about control. Okay, whereas the Saxons do care about control, at least to some degree. Okay, so they want control to exceed 10. So we have Saxon control right there. So want that to be over 10. And, or, okay, excuse me, or not at fragmentation. Okay, so if the Imperium is not at fragmentation yet, then there's another way that they could win, which is to have their renown exceed 30 and have at least 4 settlements on the map. Okay, well that puts them more like the Scotti then. They want a certain amount of renown and at least 4 settlements. Okay, so they have 2 possible victory conditions depending on the status of the Imperium. All right, let's come to the civitates. Britain control exceeds 36 at Roman rule, or 27 at autonomy, or 16 at fragmentation, and, not at fragmentation, civilian dominance. All right, so they're interested in control, primarily, and how much control they need depends upon the status of the Imperium, their relationship with the dukes. It goes down. The worse their relationship gets, the less control they need to win. Okay, and if we're not talking about fragmentation, then they also need to be over in civilian dominance. So they need to be over here or down here also. All right, that gives you an overview of these rather complicated victory conditions. But in general, you can see that early game, right, the dukes and the civitates together are interested in maintaining control, but as their relationship sours, things get the victory conditions go down. Okay, and the Scotti and the Saxons are mostly interested in plunder to get their renown up and establishing some settlements in Britain. By the way, in the back of the playbook for this game, there's a pronunciation guide. Most of the names in this game are in Latin, naturally. And so here's a pronunciation guide for Latin. It tells you some basic ideas about Latin pronunciation and then a breakdown of some of the more common words. Okay, I studied Latin in graduate school, many years ago. So I sort of have already established my own pronunciation, which I think is pretty close to the real thing. But it could be that I might pronounce things slightly differently than what it says here. But as my Latin teacher used to say, there is a right and a wrong way to mispronounce Latin. So hopefully I'm mispronouncing it in the right sort of way rather than the wrong sort of way. In other words, I'm close. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Latin pronunciation, let me just point out a couple of things that might seem a little strange to an English speaker. And that is, for example, C is always hard K, as in call. Okay, so there is no soft C in Latin. Every time you see a C, you pronounce it hard like a K. And similarly for G. G is always hard, as in good. So, for example, Oceanus Germanicus. You notice both the C in, right? Seems like you would pronounce that Oceanus, but C is always hard like K. So it's Oceanus, and the G is not soft as in German, but hard as in Germanicus. Okay, so Oceanus Germanicus is how you would say it. Okay, another sort of strange thing is the V. V actually didn't really exist in Latin. It really was, well, actually you should say U didn't exist, because the V was used for both U and V. But it's pronounced like W, so it's a w sound. For example, the civitates, right, rather than the civitates, kiwitates. Okay, or let's see, let's find another one. How about this one? Ordovikes. Ordovikes is at least close to how that should be said. All right. I think that's pretty much the only sort of unusual things. I guess I would say also the I, it's always pronounced E, like a long E. And that's very interesting, especially when you get the double I endings, like this. So that should be pronounced Dumnoni-E. Yeah, it's E-E, which sounds a little strange to an English speaker, but that is how it would have been said, or at least close to how it would have been said. Dumnoni-E. Okay. All right, so I will, in general, pronounce things as I think they're normally pronounced, and it may be slightly different than what's in here, but it shouldn't be too far off anyway. Okay. Also quickly, I want to talk about the AE ending that you often see in Latin. In the pronunciation guide, let's see, where is that one? I was just looking at it. Well, where is it? There it is. Okay. Sorry. Their pronunciation for this word is demetahe. Demetahe. Okay. That is not at all how I would say that. I would say dementai. Demetai is how I would say it. So AE becomes like I in English. The word I. I. You just run that together. I. Sounds like I. Demetai. So that's how I would say that, even though I guess the pronunciation guide has different ideas. Also, another thing I noticed was, let's see, this one here. Their pronunciation is de hexidio. De hexidio, but C should never be soft. So I think this is wrong. I think it should be de excidio. De excidio, key, not C. All right. Anyway, that's not how I would pronounce it. I would say de excidio. All right. So anyway, that's enough about pronunciation. Let's carry on. All right, let's talk about player aids next. So, if you're familiar with coin games, these will look very familiar. We have the sort of menu of commands, and they're called feats in this game. Different coin games have different names for those, sometimes called special activities or something like that. Here they're called feats. Okay, and so we have commands and feats for each of the factions here, and an explanation of how to do those things. Okay, so that's pretty standard in a coin game. We also have this, an explanation of battles, and you can see how complex that is, no surprise, with this game. It's rather involved, and so a breakdown of how to do those here. On the back of this, the epoch round, so an explanation of how to do that. So that's the term in this game for the sort of campaign cards that you see in other coin games. Okay, so at the end of campaign, you come across one of these cards. Here's in general how to do that. All right, so those are the sort of player aids for the game in general. And for the bots, we have, of course, the standard flow charts you see in every, well, almost every coin game for making determinations about what the bots will actually do there. We've got battle tactics, so how the bots will engage in battle when there are decisions to be made within a battle. Here we have some general guidelines, summary guidelines, how to place and remove and move pieces, some general ideas about events, how to randomly select a location if that's necessary there. And then this fold out here about events. So if any particular event has some special instructions, we have this fold out to tell us how to do that particular event for that bot. Okay, so we have that. Okay, I also want to talk about the bots themselves. If you've been around my channel at all, you'll know that one pet peeve I have about bots is when they're allowed to cheat. I do not like cheater bots. I like bots that are designed to play the game by the rules, the same rules that humans play by. So it really annoys me when a bot is written in such a way that it has special rules. I generally think of those as sort of cheater rules. You know, the bot gets to cheat. And I get it. You know, the idea is that these bots are created for solitaire play. Okay, and it's hard to create a bot that's really going to give a human player a run for their money. So they add in special advantages to the bots to make them more competitive. Okay, that makes sense. I get that. But we play Nullitaire here, so we're not interested in humans. At least not in our games. So we're not interested in trying to balance out that sort of thing. We're putting bots up against each other, so there's no reason to give any bot an advantage. Okay, so for me, I don't like those kinds of cheater rules. Okay, so I really like it when I read information about bots where it's like, oh, they play by the same rules as humans. Okay, so check this out. Important. Non-players, okay, the bots, follow the same rules as players. Normal resources and renown costs, requirements, and procedures apply. Great, I love that. Except, as specified in Rule 8.1.2, commands not limited. Okay, well that's pretty standard in a coin game. The bots often have this advantage. Commands not limited. So, non-players entitled to limited command by sequence of play. 2.3.4, not commands by event. Instead, execute full command and feat. Okay, well that's a cheater rule. You know, so it's basically saying whenever a bot is given the choice of only a limited command, it gets to just go ahead and use a full command and feat. I guess it would be down here. So supposing that the first faction did a command only, let's say, then the second faction would only have a limited command available, but no, they get to actually go down there and take the full command and feat if they want to. Okay, that's not how humans play. Humans would only get to go there or pass, and that's it. Alright, so I'm going to take away that rule. I'm not going to let these bots cheat. They will play the same way humans do, therefore we will ignore that rule. But here's a fun fact. There's a little box here for difficulty for the bots, and so here under one player introductory option, so we can make, so the idea here is to make the bots easier for a solitaire player. For the least challenge, allow non-players, when granted a limited command by sequence of play, to carry out a command in just one space and no feat, ignoring the non-player exception, allowing a full multi-space command and feat. Okay, so essentially we're doing that. Our bots are going to be playing on the one-player introductory difficulty, essentially, because that just means ignore the commands not limited. Okay, so actually we are playing by the rules for the bots. We're just playing on super easy mode, that's all. I think we're now ready to begin playing the game. So I've turned over the top card, so this will be our played card over here, and we also turn over the top card of the deck. Okay, so factions can see the next card coming up. Also, we do have these pivotal event cards. Every faction has one of these cards. Essentially, they can play it sometime during the game to interrupt the normal flow of play to do something interesting for them. Okay, on their flow charts, well, I should say, there are certain requirements that have to be met in order to play these in general. I think the Scotty one does not have. Yeah, this one does not have any requirements. So the Scotty can play their card whenever they want. Okay, but the other cards do have specific requirements that have to be met. Okay, well, and we'll engage with those as we go. On the flow charts for the bots, they start with this little question up here. Okay, so that's the name of the pivotal event for the Civitates. Okay, so let's see if they want to play that. So before you do anything else, check and see if they should play that card, which means you got to go and find. Yeah, here it is over here. The box that tells you under what condition the bot will play that. I find this really annoying. I mean, if it's something that we're going to check, then just make it part of the flow chart, right? Why not put a box up there and then you got to go look over there? Just incorporate it into the flow chart. It would make a lot more sense to me. Okay. And like here, the Dukes. Okay, so I have to start here. Question mark. Will they play that? And then I got to go look. Let's see where is it? Okay, it's way down here. And then read this, figure out whether they're going to play their pivotal event. Okay, if not now, I go to the flowchart. That's a little annoying to me. Okay, but anyway, we'll have to keep an eye on those pivotal events. All right, so we've drawn our cards and we're ready to go. So the first card is Ambrosius Aurelianus, and the Civitates player is up first. So going to their flow chart, they would first check their pivotal event. That is not eligible to be played yet. So battle. Without feat, evade, or ambush, would add Britain control and or greater than 1d6 plunder. Well, no, of course not. Only the Dukes and the Civitates are on the board right now, so there's no place. And, so far they're friendly. So there's no place to battle. Nope. Okay, effective. That might be easy to see, but let's see, focus here. Come on. There's sort of a shield, sort of gray shield behind that Civitates symbol. Okay, so that shield means that it's a priority event, an event that the Kibitates really wants to play. Okay, so is it an effective such event, and the Kibitates by sequence of play may use it? Well, they can certainly use the event. No one's done anything yet, and we do see that it has that shield symbol back there. Okay, so as long as it's going to be effective, the answer will be yes. So let's check and see if it is. In general, the Kibitates and Dukes prefer the unshaded portion of any event, and the Scotty and Saxons prefer the shaded event. So let's take a look at the unshaded event. Aristocratic Champion. Shift to either dominance as desired. Okay, so that's either the military dominance or the civilian dominance. Okay. Add 4 comitates to available. Okay, well that definitely would do something. So the comitates over here that are not available yet, some would become available. Kibitates place up to 2 available comitates in a space with Britain control. Okay, so they even get some onto the map. All right, definitely effective. And the Kibitates player would definitely like to do it. So, looks like the Kibitates, right from the beginning, are going to start to break away from the Dukes. All right, so this is effective. So they'd like to play it, and so they will execute the event. See instructions if it has that sword going through there. The sword indicates special instructions. Okay, but we don't have that in this case. And use the unshaded text. All right, so the Kibitates will now do this. Okay, so the first question is, will the Kibitates shift the dominance? Right now it is at military dominance. They could shift it to civilian dominance. Okay, well, on our general non-player guidelines summary, there's no mention of it. So I went to the rule book. It's under event-driven actions. This bullet point here. No, sorry, this one. Yeah, no, it is this one, sorry. When there is a choice of who gets event benefits, such as free actions, capabilities, resources, pieces, or federati, marker, placement, or removal, select themselves whenever possible. Dukes shift to military dominance and Kibitates to civilian dominance whenever able. Okay, so they are able to do it, so they will. Shifting over to civilian dominance. All right, so that's the first part of this. Add 4 comitates to available. Okay. Next thing, 4 comitates come from there, go to available. Okay, next thing is Kibitates place up to 2 available comitates in a space with Britain control. Well, every space has Britain control, so we need to figure out where they will select to put those 2. Okay, well, as far as I can tell, there's no priorities on this to decide where these should go. Again, every space is under Britain control, and so I've gone through event locations both on the non-player guidelines and in the rule book. There doesn't seem to be anything to prioritize any particular space. So they did this randomly. And to choose a random space, what we do is we roll a d6 and a d4, and then use this chart to determine. Okay, so they rolled. The d6 rolled a 1, the d4 rolled a 3. So 1 on the d6 and 3 on the d4 gives us Kutualani. Okay, so Kutualani is where they put their 2 comitates. All right, that's the end for the Kibitates. They used the event. Okay, the Dukes player is up next, and they can use a full command and feat if they like. Alright, so to the flow chart. Still not in a position to play their pivotal event, so we'll go down the flow chart here. Intercept would battle greater than 2d6 raiders. Well, there are no raiders on the map right now. Intercept is the way the Dukes try to stop them from taking plunder. Okay, so the answer is no. Effective event. Okay, so there's that shield behind the Duke's symbol there again. So a priority event. And Dukes by sequence of play may use it. No, the event's already gone, so the answer to that is no. Okay, Duke's priority event first or second on upcoming card. The answer to that is yes. The upcoming card is Classis Britannica, and we do see the shield behind the Dukes as first eligible there. So that is yes, true. Therefore, the Dukes is going to pass. Okay, so let's come up here to the sequence of play is way up here at the top of this board. Okay, so the Dukes is going to pass here. So for passing, we see Britons +3 resources, Barbarians +1 renown. By the way, Barbarians is the term used for both the Scotti and the Saxons in this game, and remain eligible. Okay, so the Dukes is going to get 3 resources. Since we are at Roman rule, and at military dominance under autonomy, the Dukes and the Civitates share resources. They just use the blue cylinder. And so the Dukes don't spend any of their own resources. At autonomy with civilian dominance, the Dukes has to ask permission from the Civitates to use the resources, their resources. And at fragmentation, they're both on their own. Okay, so right now, Roman rule, the Dukes are using the Civitates resources, so they're going to gain 3 there. Okay, that's it for the Duke's turn. So the Scotti are up next, then. And again, they can still use a full command and feat. So I'm going to see what they want to do. Okay, so thinking about pivotal events. You know, I take back what I said before about making it part of the flowchart. I hadn't really thought about this clearly. Because pivotal events actually interrupt the regular flow. And they can only be played before anything's done on the card. Right. So right now a pivotal event cannot be played because some factions have already acted on this card. So when a card is played, basically every faction has to consider whether they're going to play their pivotal event before anybody does anything. So it really isn't part of the regular sequence of play. Anyway, the Scotti, their pivotal event is the only one that actually meets the criterion to be played. But again, some factions have already acted on this card, so it's too late to do that. Okay, so we're going to go down the flow chart here. Scotti have raiders in 2+ clear, and or 15+ raiders on the map, and or greater than 2d6 plunder. Okay, again, there are no raiders on the map for the Scotti yet, so the answer to that is no. Effective priority event for the Scotti, and Scotti by sequence of play may use it. No, they can't use the current event. A priority Scotti event first or second on upcoming card. No. Scotti are last on the upcoming card, even though that is a priority event for them. So no. Scotti warband could trap or ambush and or would assault. No, there are no warbands on the map for the Scotti. Scotti warbands are all on the map and would march. Well, no. Again, there are none on the map. 25+ Scotti raiders off the map. Yes, all 30 of their raiders are off the map. And a d6 roll of 1 to 4. Okay, so they had to roll on that, and the roll is a 2. Okay, so yes, they are going to raid as many regions, not cities, as able, with surprise, that may deep raid first region below, or ransom. Okay, that's what they're going to do. So let's talk about the raid command for the Scotty and see how this works. So it's to attract raiders and plunder enemies. Okay, so they're going to send those those raiders they have into the island and try to take some plunder away. Okay, and maybe engage in a little skirmish while they're doing it. Location: up to 4 spaces without Scotty control and adjacent to Oceanus Septentrionalis or Hibernicus, or to Caledonia, or within 1 space of a Scotty settlement with a Scotty warband, or adjacent to a sea bordering such a settlement. Okay, well, they don't have any settlements on the board right now, so they're going to have to come from either Hibernicus or Septentrionalis Sea, or they're going to have to come from up north in Caledonia, which is up there. Okay, and those 2 seas are the one over here on the western side and the one up there in the northeastern side. Excuse me. All right. Cost is 0 or 1 renown per target space. Okay, and pay all before resolving any. Interesting thing about Pendragon as compared to other coin games is that in this game you have to decide everything you're going to do first. So determine all of the spaces in which you're going to perform a command and all the spaces in which you're going to perform a feat. Then you pay for the whole thing, and then you do it, which I actually like. I wish all coin games did it this way, so it keeps everything sort of more orderly. Instead of like saying, I'm going to do this here, and then you pay for it and do it, and then decide, oh, maybe I'll do it over there too, which is how most coin games do things. But it can get a little confusing, especially when there are space restrictions and other things like that. Okay, and this one has 4 space restriction. Okay, so what's the difference in whether we pay 1 or 0? Well, we're going to, this is the procedure, select spaces, pay, then resolve each. Pay 0 renown to place 1 d4 raiders, or 1 renown to place 2 d4 raiders. Okay, so we get, potentially more if we pay. If from Caledonia, less number of Carwentii and Textuere forts. So those are the 2 spaces here. Carwentii here and Textuere here, and they do have 1 fort each right now. So if the Scotty are going to come in from Caledonia, they have to subtract 2 from their from their roll to do that. Okay, right now anyway. Or if from a patrolled sea, less forts bordering it. Well, Oceanus Hibernicus is not patrolled right now. There's the no patrolled marker there. And Septentrionalis is also, up there, also not patrolled. So if they come in from those seas, which by the way, every place they can get from Caledonia, they can get from those seas. If they come from there, then they don't have to subtract anything because those are not patrolled. Okay, but if they were patrolled, then it would be the number of forts adjoining or adjacent to those seas. They would have to subtract that number from their roll. Okay. If a region, those raiders may take prosperity up to the lower of population or raiders as plunder. Each unit may carry only 1 plunder. So they'd, pick up the gold cubes and put them on. We pick up the gold cubes and put them on top of the boat, essentially, to show that they've taken it. Okay, then just placed raiders may battle an enemy there. So this is the skirmish they can do. If Saxon control or settlement plundered, Saxons lose that much renown. Okay, there are no Saxons on the board right now, so that won't do anything. All right, let's figure out where they're going to want to do this. Looking back at the raid priorities on the flowchart, they might want to use surprise. That may deep raid in the first region. So let's go look at surprise over here. with raid only as deep raid for first region to reach higher priority target where prosperity exceeds number of enemy troops. Okay, so using surprise, essentially they can do it with either raid or battle in the raid or battle space, and it may be a deep raid target. So how this works is when they do assault, they have an advantage. They get to use what's called coup de main in this game. So that makes it easier for them to assault a stronghold. That raid may be a deep space adjacent to a valid raid target. So they can find a valid raid target, maybe along the coast, and then they could go one adjacent to it. So they could move in even further inland and attack there, or steal plunder from there. Okay, now that's what would be called a deep raid. Okay, so surprise allows them to potentially do that. Okay. Dukes or a faction with control. Dukes has first option. There may force a battle with the Scotty before the raiders plunder. Okay, so there's a potential danger in doing that. They may be forced to battle before they get a chance to even plunder. All right. So here on the flowchart, we're told, hey, try to use surprise on the first raid if it in order to make it a deep raid. Okay, so they might want to try to go in deep to get a better priority space. Okay, that's the idea. Let's see how this is going to work out. So first bullet point here, if Njal Neugierlach, sorry, I do not speak Welsh, so I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, but hopefully that's close. Per box below to right. Okay, that's a particular event card that could come into play. It's not in play now, so we'll skip that. Second priority, roll 2d4 raiders, at least subtraction. Okay, so that means they want to pay the 1 renown, and so roll 2d6 raiders, or sorry, 2d4 raiders, at a place where they would lose the least, they would lose the least of them. So for example, if they were trying to come down from Caledonia, they'd have to subtract 2 for the forts that are at Carweti and Texuerti. Okay, so, but if they come in from either of the oceans they can come in from, then there's no subtraction. So they'll want to come in from the seas. That's essentially what we're saying here. They don't want to come down from Caledonia. But like I said, every place they can reach from Caledonia right now, they can reach from one of these seas anyway. So we'll just make sure we're coming in, the Scotty are coming in from the sea. Okay, and that will be a 0. There'll be no subtraction to do that. Okay, so we need to roll a d6 and determine what they'll do based on that. So I already rolled it. They rolled a 1. Okay, so 1 to 4. Target up to roll the number of regions with 2d4. First where Scotty already there or adjacent. Okay, so they're just going to select one region to actually roll, to put the 2d4 raiders. That means they're going to have to pay 1 renown to do this. And I've already marked every space on the board that is adjacent to one of these 2 seas that they could come from. So that indicates every place they could get to without the deep raid. Okay. And so they're going to want to select one of those, or they're going to want to select a deep raid. We'll have to talk about that in a minute. All right. Well, there's no Scotty already on the board or adjacent, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's look at the priorities here first. So when you see the small letters A, B, these are like tiebreaker priorities. So to narrow it down, basically. So first tiebreaker, at enemy control. Well, everything's under Britain control, so that doesn't help. At highest difference in population minus enemy troops. Okay, so we can kind of narrow it down using that. So by considering just spaces where the population minus troops is highest, we've narrowed down the choices to 2. There's Durotriges here, where there's a population of 2, that's this number down here, and only 1 troop. So that's a difference of 1. And Parisia up here, which also has a population of 2 and 1 troop. So therefore its difference is also 1. All the other spaces are lower than that, either 0 or negative difference. Okay, so those are the only 2 that they'll consider right now for this raid. But we now need to consider the possibility of using surprise for a deep raid. So let's go back over here and consider this. So use surprise only as a deep raid for first region to reach higher priority target where prosperity exceeds number of enemy troops. So in other words, they'll use surprise to get into use a deep raid to get into a further inland. If by doing so they'll reach a target that has a higher priority than either of these 2 for them, in this case that means it would have a greater difference between troops and greater difference between troops and population. And also it must satisfy this further condition that the prosperity there must exceed the number of enemy troops. Okay, so let's see if there is such a space. So there are no spaces that have a higher priority for them in this particular case. So we were looking for a potential deep raid space where the difference between population and troops was greater than 1. There are some spaces that are also at 1 difference. So for example, Atrabates here, there's a 3 population and there's 2 troops. Okay, well the difference is 1. Okay, great, but that's still no better than Durotriges over here, which is at a 1 difference. Okay, and Kornoi, excuse me, also is at 1 difference, so that's no better. All right, so they're not going to use surprise in this particular case. So of the 2 possible spaces now, we have no further tiebreaker priorities to select from, so the Scotty are just going to select randomly from those 2. Now the rule book tells you, excuse me, that when it's equal chance, you can just do it by rolling a die and just, assign equal chance numbers to each and do it that way. But I prefer to just always use the random spaces table. Just do it the same way every time. Okay, so they rolled on that, and they rolled a 2 on the d6 and a 4 on the d4. So 2, 4. Looking at this chart, 2 and 4 lands us here. That's neither of the 2 we're looking for, so we just go down the list until we find, cycling back around, until we find one of the 2, and here we go. Durotriges, they find first. So that's where they're going to do the raid. So Durotriges is the space they're going to select to do the first raid. They're going to pay 1 renown there and roll 2d4 to raid. Remember though, we have to select everything that's going to be done first, then pay for it, then do it. So we just mark that as the space for the first raid, and we carry on. Remember, there was only 1, so they only rolled a 1 here, so they target up to the rolled number of regions with 2d4. So they've done that. They could still select up to 3 more regions. So we carry on. If raid's above or free, so there was a raid done above, for 0 renown, where they'll roll only 1d4, at least subtraction. Okay, so once again, they're looking for a place that they can roll that 1d4 and not have to subtract so much from it, so they're going to come in from the seas, basically, because they're not patrolled. At most prosperity, and then second tiebreaker into hills. So it turns out there are 4 spaces they could reach that each have 4 prosperity cubes. 2 of them are in hills, so they're going to prioritize those. So they're going to select Wotadini and Textuarity. 2 hill spaces with 4 prosperity. They can select one more space, and so the 2 remaining are Parisi and Dekiangli, both with 4 prosperity, but they're clear regions. So they're going to choose randomly between those 2 for their last selection. They roll a 4-2, which means it will be Parisi. So the Scoti have decided everywhere they're going to raid, but they're not going to do it yet because there's still the possibility of adding a feat. Because they didn't use surprise, they're going to try to use ransom instead. So let's check that out. So ransom, before battle or with raid, it says everywhere able versus players who can pay. Okay. I treat all the bots as though they're players. I think that's more interesting usually, to just pretend they're all players. So that's what we'll do here as well. So let's look at ransom. Any region where raid any region where raid places raiders or battle. So select all regions. Each region after plunder, roll a d6. If 4 to 6, transfer 1 resource or renown from one faction that has a stronghold in the target region to Scoti renown. Okay, because the Scoti want to do this everywhere able, they're just going to do it in every space where they do the raid. All right, well, let's do the raids now. We need to pay for it first. So there's one place, Rodriguez, where the Scoti are actually going to roll 2d4. So they're going to have to pay. And the other spaces, they're only going to roll 1d4, so those won't cost them anything. So they're going to have to pay 1 renown to do this. And so now they're going to actually do these. Let's start with the 2d4 here. And remember, we're going to do ransom in every place also while we're going. So let's do the space. They'll roll 2d4. They rolled a 6. Okay. And now, because they're coming from Oceanus Cybernicus, which is not patrolled, they do not have to subtract any from that. So they'll take 6 raiders and move them down here into Rodriguez. Okay, good. So just to make sure we're doing everything right, let's go back to the raid description. Okay. So they rolled 2d6. They were coming from an unpatrolled sea, so they do not have to remove any or reduce that. Okay. If region, those raiders may take prosperity up to the lower of population or raiders as plunder. Each unit may carry only 1 plunder. Then just place raiders may battle an enemy there. Okay, but remember, we're going to do ransom, which says select all regions. Each region after plunder, roll a d6. If 4 to 6, transfer 1 resource or renown from one faction that has a stronghold in the target region to Scoti renown. So after the plunder, but before the battle, they will do that. So they're going to plunder in this space first. They're going to take the lower of population or the number of raiders, so that will be 2. And they remove 2 plunder. They always take them from the top row first, and then from the bottom row if the top row is empty. Okay, so they're going to take 2 plunder, and you just put 1 on top of 2 of the raiders, like that. Okay, and here's the easy thing to forget. When plunder happens, total prosperity is lowered. So total prosperity goes down by 2, and the prosperity plus prestige also, of course, is lowered. Okay. Good. So that's the plunder. Now they're going to do the ransom, which means they have to roll a d6. Okay, they rolled a 6 for the ransom. And it says if they roll a 4 to 6, transfer 1 resource or renown from one faction that has a stronghold in the target region to Scoti renown. Well, there's only one stronghold here, and that's from the Civitate. So The Civitates will lose 1 resource, and the Scotti get 1 renown. Okay, the last part of the raid command says that they can battle there if they want. Just place raiders may battle an enemy there. Okay, and looking at the priorities for the Scotti, the very last bullet point, battle only where assault, per 8.4.2. Okay, so this is a bit tricky. But in order to figure this out, you use this chart here. It's on the non-player battle tactics. Okay. And what you do is you look up the number of raiders on this table off to this side. So we have 6. Okay. And we're considering whether or not we can assault. Can raider assault remove a stronghold? Okay. So what that means is we're questioning whether or not the Scotti right now, if they were to battle, would be able to remove this town. Would they totally destroy the town or not? And if they would not completely destroy the town, then they won't be interested in battle. Okay, so back to this chart. So we were considering, we have 6 raiders in this case, and we're considering whether or not they could destroy a town. This is the town column. 6 raiders, town. So we're looking at this this box right here. It says 0, and then 3 with some die rolls there. Okay, so 0 means they would be able to destroy the stronghold with this many withdrawn units. So if there are no withdrawn units in it, then they would be able to destroy it. Or if they were able to do a coup de main, they would be able to do it on certain die rolls. Okay, but we're not doing that, so we're just looking at this number right now. It says 0. So that means that in this particular case, if the Civitates were to withdraw this militia into the fort, then these raiders would not be able to, into the town, then these raiders would not be able to destroy that town. Okay, if there were no militia here to withdraw, then they would be able to destroy that town. But because there's a militia here that could withdraw into that town to help protect it, these raiders would not be able to destroy that town in that case. Therefore, they will not do it. They will only do it, according to the Scotti procedures here, they will only do it if they're guaranteed to be able to destroy the stronghold, no matter what the defending faction might do. Okay, so that is a handy little chart. Helps us figure that out without having to do a bunch of math. All right, so there's going to be no battle here. So for the next raid, I selected I opted to do Wotadini up there. The Scotti rolled a 4 on 1d4, so they put 4 raiders and they plundered 2 there. So total prosperity goes down by 2, and now they're going to roll to see if they will ransom. The roll is a 2. That's not good enough for ransom, so they will not steal some resources there. Okay, and now we need to figure out whether or not they will battle. Seems very unlikely. There's 4 militia in that space. But let's check. Okay, so in this case we have 4 raiders, and we're considering a hill fort. There's 2 hill forts in that space. So once again, they could destroy it if it had no withdrawn units in it, but there are 4 militia there that could easily withdraw. Okay, so no battle there. For the next raid, we're going to Textuardi, and the Scotti rolled a 4 again. So getting very lucky with these 1d4 raids. Okay, so that's coming in there. They're going to plunder 2 more. That's going to drop prosperity even more. So now the dukes are no longer have no longer met their victory conditions. Enough prosperity has already been taken by the Scotty. Okay, so now they're going to roll for ransom in Textuarity. They roll a 2 again, so no ransom there. Now we'll see if they'll battle. There are 2 possibilities here. There's a town and also a fort. There are 3 cavalry as well there. Okay, so looking at this chart, we have 4 raiders. Looks like they can't destroy a town at all, even with no withdrawn troops. And they could only destroy a fort with 0 withdrawn troops. Okay, and again, there are 3 cavalry there that could withdraw. So there'll be no battle there. Okay, on to the last raid, Parisi. Well, the Scotty luck has run out. They roll a 1. So just 1 Scotty raider comes into Parisi, just takes 1 plunder there. Now they'll roll for ransom. Well, this time they got a lucky roll on ransom, so a 6. Okay, the Civitate has a stronghold in that area, so they will take another resource from them and add it to their renown. Will they battle there with just 1 raider? No, they could not take out a hill fort at all. Okay, so no battle. Okay, so the Scotty have used a command and a feat, and they've managed to raid several areas of Britain, and they've got some plunder. Remember that raiders do not count against control, so we ignore them when considering control. They've just come in, you know, they're not hanging around. They're not permanent residents or anything like that. So they don't count for control. Britain still has control of all these spaces. Okay, so that's a raid. It's pretty involved. It's I think, you know, one of the most complicated commands, not just in Pendragon, but probably in any coin game. Okay, but there we went through it carefully, made sure we did everything. Well, hopefully I did everything right. But there we go. Okay, so that is the end of this round. So the Civitates and the Scotty are now ineligible, and the Dukes and the Saxons are eligible for the next card, which is Classis Britannica. And so Barbarians is the next card available. Okay, I know we only made it through 1 card, but I think I'm going to end this video there. I spent a lot of time describing setup and the bots and whatnot. So that gets us going. But I hope you'll join me when we continue on with this game going forward in this series. Okay, I will see you then.